one of the key features too, the most important law within this reality, natural law, is this concept of morality. Many people going through a spiritual awakening, and even people who are not going through one, have no clue what morality is. So today I'm going to be explaining exactly what morality is from mysticism. Morality is at the very core of this reality. It is the guiding principles of this dimension, and its most ancient name is known as Sunyata Dharma. So what morality is when it comes to mysticism, all mystical traditions, has to do with what is best depicted in the tarot. And in the tarot, what we know as the Justice card and as the World card. These two major arcana represent the masculine and the feminine principles of morality. They both mean the same thing, but in a different expression. And what this morality is expressing to us in every different mystical tradition, and in the tarot, and in the Hermetic arts, is that for one to be moral, they have to know that there is an effect for their cause, for their actions. And not just that, that to guide whether or not an action is in alignment with natural law is to know if that action is moral. And how we know if an action is moral is if it does no harm to another being. It does no violation to another being. Now, when I say this, the first thing that comes to most people's minds is the gray zone. It doesn't come to the very blatant and obvious ways that we can violate another person, whether it's their physical property or their territorial property. We think of the gray zone of what violation of another being or harming another being is. And that's all well and fine, because the gray zone is one where there's just going to be karma, which is the ignorance of our actions, the learning phase, where we always ask for grace, and we're always, at least people who are spiritual awakening, are always trying to become more conscious, trying to make better actions, and learning from their cause and effect chain reactions. So that gray zone of violating another or harming another being, and how we can look at that through mysticism, is just as forgivable as a person's own soul path or their journey. But when it comes to the guiding principles of this reality, would you want there to be no natural law? Would you want there to be no universal consciousness that has an actual preference and bias towards good, towards beauty? No, you would not want that. And so when it comes to natural law, we're not looking at this gray area that is forgivable or a person's own journey of becoming awakened or conscious. What we're looking at are the blatant forms of violation of all beings. And that is what the deepest, most esoteric meaning to the Justice card in the tarot represents. It is natural law communicating to us through that archetype that no matter what we think will lead to a moral action, there is such a thing as right and wrong, no matter what we want to be right or wrong. So it doesn't matter from a cosmic, universal consciousness perspective, whatever we make up is right or whatever we make up is wrong. Moral relativism is not going to manipulate cosmic consciousness into convincing it that it was a correct and aligned and right action, no matter how much we want to think that we can make up our own right and wrong. The Justice card in the tarot says, do whatever you want in this reality, but there are consequences. There is a cause and effect. There is a karmic chain if you harm or violate another being as you are expressing yourself or as you are being however you want to be. And that is the ground rules of this reality. So a lot of times what we do is we try to come up with a bunch of our own toxic judgments or our own conditioning and then project that onto morality. And then we start trying to distort or manipulate morality into what we want it to be, into our own belief systems, so that then we can go around judging everyone and calling everyone else not moral. When in reality, morality is actually not a prude. Morality is saying, hey, do whatever you want as long as you're not violating another being, as long as you're not harming another being, as long as you're not committing what's known in Hermeticism as theft. So morality is the core feature of natural law. And what morality is overseeing is our freedom and our personal sovereignty. The opposite of freedom and personal sovereignty is to commit theft. Theft does not mean that we stole food because we were hungry or anything else of a gray nature. The esoteric meaning of theft is when our spiritual property is being coerced or violated. And our spiritual properties, according to natural law, is our life, our rights, our freedom, and our physical body. All of these are called will. So these are our will. When we use our will to overpower another person's will, that is an unmoral act. If we want to get technical, that is the esoteric definition of evil. And when our will is being overpowered by another person's will, that is an unmoral act, also known as evil. So, morality is the force that is overseeing theft, because theft is what creates evil. And evil is an action that is based on coercion, force, or slavery. Another way of saying all of this is love is freedom and evil is force. So we know there's a gray space of nuance between harming another being and how our actions, if they're rooted in a place of ignorance, are innocently enough or not innocently enough going to create more cause and effect that we will get reflected to us. That is a more forgivable place to be in than being an outright immorality. So being an immorality is where we are inflicting our will onto another, where we are violating another being in some way. And that is what the justice card represents. It represents no matter what you think is right or wrong, there is a universal principle of what is correct action, which is not harming someone or a being, versus incorrect action, which is violating a being. And should we choose to create actions that harm another, we will answer for those, no matter what we think that we will get away with it if we shape our belief systems to believe in some way that taking another person's property, whether that's another person's human rights, whether that's their choices over their property and their life. Now, children are protected by natural law, but they cannot make adult choices over themselves the way adults can. If they did, then this too would be an abuse of natural law, since children are in an esoteric state known as nations. So morality is about allowing others to live and let live. And what you will see is that this naturally produces order, because freedom is the order of the cosmos. That's what order means when we are talking about chaos and order. Order is the force of love that leads to freedom. And chaos is the force of fear that leads to control. To violate another being's spiritual property, or even by trying to mandatorily force another being into making a decision, there are absolutely consequences from a universal consciousness perception when we are applying force, when we are coercing other beings into either making decisions that we would make, or either trying to get and force another being to do something. And so when we're looking at morality, what we're looking at is not just violating another being or harming them. Even deeper than that, it is this concept of coercion. And what you will notice when you are going through a spiritual awakening is a constant theme of coercion. Am I forcing other beings to share the same values as me? Am I oppressing other beings for not sharing the same values as me? Am I being forced, coerced, and oppressed in some way to having to take on the same decisions or values by power structures? We have to notice when coercion is taking place. But the funny thing about noticing when coercion is taking place to us is that we tend to not realize when we are doing the same thing to others. And so what we do is perpetuate a time-space reality where we're having us be inside some way that coercion is taking place to us on a collective level. But morality is not this flippant force that favors one person's bias and distortions over another person's bias and distortions. Instead, morality has a bias, and it doesn't have to do with anyone's personal bias. What it has to do with is the bias of universal consciousness, which is towards right action, or what we would call good or beauty. And right action, there absolutely is such a thing as taking right action, and there is absolutely such a thing as taking wrong action. This is why a logos comes into this reality in the first place. It's to remind and awaken people into such a thing as there being good and bad. I know that that is a controversial topic, especially with beings who have a very high level of consciousness and are operating on a high frequency, because we're operating now from the state of non-duality. But even non-duality is not against and not aware that there is such a thing as right and wrong. You can maintain that level of discernment, that ability to perceive accurately and to perceive truth, even in non-duality. And so when it comes to morality, now what we have is the living, breathing action, because that's what morality is. It's not a concept, it's not a thought. It is actions that are either demonstrating right action, which is not harming another being, and it is actions that are guiding whether or not a being we are violating or we are harming. So when it comes to morality, it's something that has to do with very real, bare bones, acoustic thing. It's not a metaphysical concept, even though it's originated in mysticism and is a part of the most ancient knowledge within this universe, Sunyata Dharma. Morality is, are you taking correct and right actions, or are you taking wrong actions? And if so, there are abilities to tell by the effects, by the reflections that we're receiving. So now let's get to the world card. This is the feminine principle of morality. And in the feminine principle of morality, what the esoteric, deepest meaning of the world card means is do as you will, do as thou wilt. What it's saying in this card, even within her lack of clothing, she's straight up naked. Okay, so when we think of morality, we think of something really stiff and prude. That's a projection, that's a judgment on morality. What the world card is demonstrating is literally she's holding a baton and a banner around her, running around naked, saying, do as thou wilt, do as thou wilt, do whatever you want. She is not a prude, but don't harm anyone. So when it comes to morality, what we have to understand is that it is a very liberating concept. It is rooted in love. If you think of morality being do whatever you want, but don't harm anyone, don't perform coercion, don't perform force, it's actually unconditional love. It's allowing you to express your consciousness in a time-space reality and experience that level of unconditional love. But what is a part of unconditional love is that it's not just for one being. It's for all. So if a time-space reality wants to have guiding principles for how to engage within that reality, how to correctly interact with that reality, it can't just give unconditional love for one being's actions if those unconditional love is producing actions that are harming and violating another being. So what the world card represents is unconditional love. Do as you wilt. However, if your will to do is inflicting pain on another, violating another, forcing another, well, then now the justice card has to appear. Now there's consequences for that. So these are the masculine and feminine principles of morality. And however we choose to intake this esoteric meaning of it depends on our ability to be unbiased, our ability to remove all of our filters, judgments, and conditionings, where we want morality to be whatever we want morality to be. And instead, look at morality as the unconditional love of showing us that there is always universal justice to be performed when a being is violating us or we are violating a being, and yet the knowing from a universal consciousness perspective, a cosmic consciousness perspective, that we are source incarnated, and therefore all beings are sovereign, all beings are free, and all beings have rights. So even if we forget that, universal consciousness doesn't, and it would never dare interfere with the being's choice to do as thou wilt. I hope this has made you more moral. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.